My name is Chester Jesus Soria. I graduated in class of 2012. When I started craft, I was put in the Fort Greene class. At the time, we had the partnership with the New York Times local. Third day of class, we had a field trip with the whole class to Fort Greene. And one of the first things that I had to do was go out there and knock on the doors of the offices for the local politicians and shake their hands and meet them. I was eventually able to sort of break a story about, at that point, Assemblyman Hakeem Jeffries had filed paperwork to run for Congress. I remember writing the story, being out in the field, on the phone with my craft professor, and freaking out, trying to figure out how to tell the story, how to write the story within the deadline, and not feeling totally confident about the story, but I turned it in, and it actually beat the New York Times website by a couple of hours. I came to this school with a little bit of a background in criminal justice, or at least an interest in criminal justice issues. And I used that to my advantage in developing an idea on the story of false confessions, and specifically the lack of videotaping for in interrogations. And I ended up focusing my story on New York Police Department. The Central Park 5 was sort of becoming a little bit more in the, it was more in the zeitgeist at the time. I focused my story on how NYPD had, despite years of commitments by the mayor and by the police commissioner, failed to come through with its commitment to videotape interrogations. And I was able to actually sit down with one of the Central Park 5 who were actually videotaped by prosecutors at the time. But the big issue is the fact that when authorities sit down, especially with young people or people that have certain disabilities, they are vulnerable to make false confessions. So it was a really amazing experience to sort of meet all these people, hear their stories, hear their perspectives, and weave it into a story that eventually actually was published by Juvenile Justice Information Exchange. There was a really big commotion in New York City over the deaths of two police officers who were shot and killed by a man in Brooklyn. And the story exploded in terms of conflict between political forces in the city, the city hall, police unions, and the police department itself. Not only was I able to cover the actual events as they unfolded, one day I remember I wrote 3 different stories within a 12-hour gap of 3 different events. It was exhausting, but I think it helped me eventually get a exclusive sit-down with the police commissioner, Bill Bratton, not too long after national headlines broke out about how police officers turned their backs on the commissioner and the mayor during a funeral for one of the officers. To be transported from the scene of the crime to sitting down in one police plaza with the commissioner was a real eye-opening moment in terms of where I was in my career and what I learned at CUNY and the job since. My road to radio is a very unconventional one. I took the radio class that we're all required to at CUNY, but I actually didn't really focus too much on radio as a platform. But the experience that I got at CUNY and at Metro and even at Gotham Gazette to sort of tell these stories through the eyes of normal people and their experiences helped me get the job that I do now, where we talk about very intimate stories with very fascinating people. So Avante Okendo was a little boy. He was 14 years old and autistic. He disappeared, and the search went on for months, and it wasn't until about 3 months after the fact that his remains were found. When I finally joined WNYC, though, we were able to find Avante's older half-brother. So we were able to connect with him. I actually, a little bit of the skills that you learn at CUNY, I found him through Facebook. We connected on Facebook, and I walked him through the process, and we were able to book him and bring him to the studio, and he shared his amazing story about perseverance and finding strength through some really dire moments. We're in an industry that's very unpredictable. You don't know what you're going to be doing. But at the very least, CUNY and the experiences that I got here prepared me to be flexible, prepared me to prepare for the worst, because you never know. It's a very tough industry, but I left with the tools and the knowledge and the network that has really come in handy in some really tough moments.